Well, here we are, guys. It is a special Christmas edition podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the weekly daily podcast. Another episode on Christmas Day. This is the first, I believe, Christmas Day podcast in the history of this podcast. And what do I have in store for you? Nothing really. Just more rambling about my life. I'll probably talk about some Christmas stories and things. But good to be here, recording the podcast here real quick before I fly out later. Actually, not even later tonight. I have a flight at 6 a.m. tomorrow, and my whole big plan was I'm going to stay up. I'm going to stay up all night long, go to the airport around 3:30, 4 a.m., catch my flight home, sleep on the plane. Probably not going to work that well. I'm going to be wrecked for the next 2 days. But what can you do? The flights were unbelievably expensive, and you just got to pick the ones that don't cost extra money. I don't know. But here we are. It's Saturday evening. I almost didn't have time. I'm trying to squeeze this in before running to a show. So if I'm all over the place, all discombobulated, then, actually, I'm always a little discombobulated, so probably won't be too different from the norm. But thanks for tuning in. Speaking of discombobulated, first joke I ever told at Comedy Works, the club in the club in comedy, the club in Denver, Colorado. First time I ever performed there for New Talent Night. Got a 2-minute set. Pretty sweet, 2 minutes. And the first joke I did was a joke about the word discombobulated and how, it was a terrible joke. I think the joke went like this. What's up with the word discombobulated? Why not just call it combobulated? That sounds chaotic enough. I don't know if that's verbatim, but that's pretty close. And if you're going, hey, Ben, that's not very funny, you'd be right. Not a great joke. Not even a joke, probably. But what can you do? It's been a busy week. It's been a lot going on. I talked a lot last week about being in my feelings, buzzing my hair off like Britney Spears, and I'm still there. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm feeling a little bit better, but I have been doing. Sorry, I'm hearing some neighbors, and I'm trying to not be super loud. It's always awkward when people are listening in on my mental health checkup. But I'm feeling a little bit better. I have felt a bit of a roller coaster the last week or two. Starting to feel a little bit better, but here's the deal. It's so funny. As soon as you think you figured it out, you start to realize like, oh, I haven't figured it out at all. You just keep learning in life, which is great, but it'd be nice to like lock something down and have it work for the rest of your life. But I'm starting to realize that, the stress from my job, stress from comedy, stress from just all the stresses in my life are coming to a head right now and have made me feel not very well. But I'm also realizing because my throat is starting to, I think I'm dealing with some acid reflux, which I dealt with last year at this same period. And I'm starting to realize that, I think that acid reflux is from the stress rather than from my diet. I'm sure the diet affects it a little bit, but it's interesting to be like, oh my gosh, how do I keep discovering new things and being like, oh, that makes complete sense. If you're really stressed out, that's, Google it. Can acid reflux happen from being really stressed? Yeah, absolutely. Ugh. So, living and learning. I'm trying to. I haven't eaten today. It's actually kind of crazy. I had a shake this morning, and it is now 5:20 p.m. And I went for a run earlier. I can't believe I'm not super hungry, but I was like, do I have time to eat before the pod? And I don't really. I have to go to a show pretty soon after this, so hopefully I can eat before the show so I don't go the entire day without food. But Yeah, it's been an interesting week. Uh, just getting ready for Christmas. With it being Christmas, what I'll do is I'll talk about my week in comedy and kind of what I've been up to, and then I'll finish off the episode with just Christmas memories, Christmas cheer, Christmas stuff. You know, will it be good? Who knows? But if you're listening to this on Christmas, then you're probably super bored anyways. Actually, to be honest, it's funny because Christmas, you go, oh, Christmas is super exciting. It's a huge day. But if you're not visiting people, if you're just doing Christmas stuff at home, you open presents, it's like 9:30 a.m. and you're like, oh, I got the rest of the day to do whatever. It's actually pretty chill. I'm kind of a fan of it, if I'm being honest. Um, but yeah, so this week was a busy one. Um, Work wise, kind of winding down a little bit. Fortunately, the last couple of days of work going into the end of the year here, kind of the holiday portion, was not as crazy. And I definitely felt relief from that lack of work, not just pedal to the metal, metal to the pedal, pedal to the metal. Is that a saying? I don't even know. But yeah, I was behind all week, man. I mean, it was a busy last weekend. And then, of course, I think I recorded the last podcast on Monday. So I didn't go to an open mic on Monday, but Tuesday went to an open mic, which it was the first time in a long time went to a mixed open mic, which was like music. It was just music and comedy, but it's open to kind of like whatever. If I guess the other stuff would be poetry. Uh, I don't know. That's kind of the only other thing I can think of. But usually it's music and comedy at the mixed mics. And it was kind of nice. It was this dive bar off Broadway, which is like, I think it was in Inglewood, which is south of Denver, and everybody got to do 15 minutes, which is great because that's way longer than a comedy open mic. Most comedy open mics you get like 3 or 4 minutes, so you barely have time to do jokes. So 15 minutes was great, but I will say I was still in a weird mindset, and I begged good friend of the pod, Ethan Everhart. I said, will you please come to the open mic with me? He goes, I want to go to another open mic. I said, will you please? I'm so sad, Ethan Everhart. Will you please help me through this difficult time? And he goes, man, you're always in a weird headspace, aren't you, Ben? He didn't say that. Actually, he was very kind to come. He didn't say that, but he would be in the right if he were to have said that because yeah, I'm a bit of a mess, and a bit of a mess more often than I should be. I'm okay. I've been telling people I'm going through the Britney Spears phase. I shaved my head. I said, look, I said, look, if I start posting dances on Instagram in a bikini, then please reach out. Okay? Or if I shave my eyebrows, please reach out. But just, I just took step one. I said, I'll just shave the hair off. It's whatever. Mixed reviews. Some people have given me the, oh. And then other people have been like, I like it. And, I kind of agree with both. And you're probably thinking, what does that even mean? How do you even, it depends on the angle in the mirror, if I'm being honest. Some angles I go, oh, that's not too bad. Other angles I go, ooh, I'm a scary looking person. That is not a great look. But went to this mixed open mic. There's probably like 3 musicians and 5 comics. And it was like this dive bar, which I was telling Ethan, I was like, man, feels like it's been forever since I've been in a dive bar for an open mic, which isn't necessarily true. I'm sure I've been in a dive bar, but I guess being in unfamiliar territory and like a new dive bar and also not surrounded by a ton of people that you know, which is the comedy open mics that I go to. It's like, all right, everybody knows everybody for the most part. So there's a sense of comfort. And I was like, I feel weird. It's funny being in the mindset that I've been in. I've told a couple people this, and I've probably talked about it on here before, but as much as I've done comedy at this point, I'm 6 years into comedy, done it thousands of times. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. You get used to it. You gain experience. You get better. And you get used to bad shows, open mics, whatever. It's just like, it doesn't matter for the most part. Obviously, there's big opportunities that come along, and you certainly still have nerves and stuff. But for like open mics, it's like, whatever. But I was so in my head last week that even going to that open mic, I was like, dude, I don't have my thoughts together. My brain isn't functioning correctly. I'm anxious, this, that, and the other. I'm gonna bomb this open mic. And it's like that's not something I've said in a long time. Or something that I've felt where I'm like, I just don't feel like I can go be a human being on stage. But it actually ended up being pretty fun. Um, And like I said, nice to do a little bit more time. So I think I'm going to try to implement that a little bit more into my routine. Do some mixed mics. Might try to do some open mics down in Colorado Springs or some of the other scenes to kind of just mix it up a little bit. But that was fun. It's always good hanging with Ethan. Um, he had a pretty good set. He went up as the last comic, and yeah, he did very well. I think we were both like pleasantly surprised. It's one of those where you're like, was this stupid to come to? Is this going to be worthwhile? I think it was very productive, and I'll probably do that a lot more. But that was Tuesday. Wednesday, I think I stayed in, and um, what did I do? I might have done laundry or something. Read a little bit. I've been reading this new book called The Object, which it's been pretty good. It's a sci-fi book. It's a book about, just basically somewhat present day, maybe like 2027, and some NASA lady discovers an anomaly, an object in space around Saturn, uh, and they don't know what it is. And yeah, long story short, they're trying to figure out what it is, and basically making uh, a mission, or not making a mission. What's the word I'm looking for? They create a mission, I guess, to go out to space and intercept this object and see what it is. So that's been pretty cool. Been pretty good so far. I'm maybe a third of the way through the book. Looking forward to it. I asked, I think it's called Pollyanna, I think is what it's called. My family has done for the last, I don't know, for quite a while for Christmas gifts. It's basically because at this point, it's like I have three siblings. Uh, they're all married. Most of them have kids. My parents, like, there's a bunch of people involved. And instead of everybody being like, hey, we're spending thousands of dollars on gifts, and I don't want to speak for my siblings and others, but I don't have thousands of dollars to gift out every year. So we just draw one name. We throw a bunch of names in. Everybody gets one name. You get a good gift for one person, and that's what we do. I think it's called Pollyanna, but we've been doing that, and the last couple of years, including this year, I've just said, get me books. Get me books. That's all I want. And it's funny because I don't know how the gift giver feels, but they always go, what kind of book? And I said, any book, which I don't know if they like that or hate that. I can see that it's like, ugh, well, what do you want? But genuinely, I want to read anything and everything. I mean, obviously some stuff I like more than others. I've read a lot of stuff that's not great, but I'm trying to expand my horizons. Okay. I'm trying to, be a better person, have a better vocabulary. Okay. Maybe I don't like certain subjects, but you know what? You don't learn if I only read stuff that I truly loved, it's like, well, then, okay, I just walk around and be like, I know a ton about space and golf because that's all I read. Nah, dude, you got to mix it up. You got to mix it up a little bit. Because even if it's subjects that you don't like, there's good authors that like make it interesting. So, even with like, I almost feel like that. I just watched YouTube has they've been putting a bunch of movies on YouTube with ads. And I just watched A Knight's Tale, which has Heath Ledger. I don't know if you guys remember that. I think it was like maybe an early 2000s movie. But it popped up and I randomly started watching it. And I would say generally I'm not the biggest fan of knight type movies, but I read, or just stories, but I actually read a book about, well, it wasn't about a knight, but it was during that time frame, like 1200 AD, medieval times. There were knights and earls and whatever the names are in there. And it was very good. It was about a guy who built cathedrals or churches, which again, you hear that and you go, that sounds, it was like 950 pages. It was so long. It was the longest book I've ever read. And you hear that and you go, that doesn't sound that cool. But it was written very well. It was a page turner. Um, and so A Knight's Tale is I was watching that, and that's probably one where it's like I don't know if I'll like this, but it was a good movie. It was interesting seeing a movie. It's been so long since I've seen that movie, and you see like a bunch of old actors that you're like, oh man, actors have such an interesting timeline. A lot of actors have like their day in the sun for like a decade and then they're gone. Like it's very rare. I mean, it's very rare as an actor to be very successful for like multiple movies in general. And it's even more rare obviously to be like a Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Cruise, like people who it's like, "Oh, for decades they've been like a massive actor." A lot of actors, they do like, they have like a decade where they crush it. Like Will Ferrell probably crushed it for about a decade, and now he's kind of taken a step back. I don't know if he directs or produces. Ben Stiller, maybe a little longer than a decade, but a lot of times they have that period. Vince Vaughn, they have a period where they crush, and then they kind of take a step back. A lot of them go into directing or just like, I don't blame them. It stinks because like Ben Stiller, Vince Vaughn, all the it's like, oh man, I would love to see more movies with you guys. That was like not my childhood, but like my formative years, like teenage into college, into young 20s, where you're like, oh, it'd be great if you guys kept making a movie. But I don't fault them for stopping. They got millions and millions, and whether it's just, hey, I want to chill with my family, or just not do movies or direct, do whatever. I get it. But I say all that to say the books. Wow, I almost forgot. Where I was, where I even started. The books, I say, just give me whatever. Just give me whatever, and we'll figure it out. My sister-in-law has my name. She sent me. I already got one book, and I already did open it. I don't know if that's this is coming out on Christmas, so I think it'll be okay. But I did open one book. She sent me a meditation book, so looking forward to reading some of that. I don't know if she listens to the podcast or heard me talking about meditation. I don't know if I talked about it on anything other than on the podcast, but I've been trying out some of the meditation stuff. We'll try doing some more of that. So looking forward to that. Reading that and anything else that I've got. But I also, speaking of the meditation, I talked about it last week. I just got that Shakti mat, which was like an acupressure. Let's talk about that, dude. Let's talk about that. Do I like that? It's not bad. I don't. So to rewind a second and give you guys explain what it is. The brand is Shakti, I think. There's multiple brands out there. That's just the Instagram ad that hit me. Well, I don't know how it got into my algorithm, but it got me. Okay. And I bought it. But it's basically a mat, and I bought the pillow as well. And it's got little spikes on it. If you're familiar with golf shoes, have like the spikes on the bottom to like make sure, give you a little grip when you're swinging into the grass. That's what it looks like. It looks like those little circular spiky things. Each little circle has maybe 8 spikes, and there's just like hundreds of these on the mat and on the pillow. So you lay down, and it's just a bunch of like really pointy pressure points. And I mean, it's supposed to have a bunch of positive effects as far as like increasing blood flow, reducing stress, anxiety, all of the above, whatever. Every product nowadays is like, hey, we just solve your life. Okay. Does your life stink at all in any avenue? Well, we'll solve all of it with 3 easy payments of $49.99. That's not what this. Actually, that's about what this costs. I think the pillow and the mat cost about $100, but I've used it pretty much every day for the last maybe 4 days. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. Same with the meditation. It's like it's hard to say short term the benefits of it, but I will say I do like it. It's a form of discipline. You lay down on it. It's pretty uncomfortable, and so you have to kind of just like you know breathe through the pain for a little bit, and then after a few minutes, it becomes like not painful, and you kind of get used to it. And then I've been doing it for 15 or 20 minutes, and um, yeah, it's hard to tell, but it does feel like it provides something. But again, is that a placebo? Is that what it's called? Placebo effect? It's hard to say. But I do think that I'll keep doing it for a while, and I'll keep you guys updated on it. But it's been interesting. I like trying new stuff. If you guys have ever tried out acupressure, let me know. Let me know if you've ever tried acupuncture or any of these other things. I'm always curious to learn more about different things like that. Sorry, I'm surfing the web during the podcast. So rude of me. But yeah, so Thursday, back to the show stuff, bouncing all over the place. My brain is tired. I'm hungry. I'm trying to have just an episode available for Christmas. It's funny because I was like, maybe I'll buy a Santa hat and some wrapping paper and do a confetti thing. And then you just like find yourself, you're like, wow, time has passed and I don't have any of that. And I'm like, will I even get a podcast out? And then you start talking for 20 minutes and you're like, ugh, should I just shut the camera off? Is this even worth people listening to? Hopefully so. But yeah, Thursday I did a show. Actually, Thursday was pretty fun. Hung out with a buddy from New York City, Devesh. Devesh Patel came into town. He started comedy. Well, not tech. I think he started comedy in Virginia Beach, if I remember correctly, for a few months. Is that right? Virginia Beach? I think that's where. But he kind of mostly started in Denver. Like he did a few months in Virginia Beach, but uh, really hit the ground running in Denver. And was in Denver for maybe 2 years and then moved to New York City. But he was visiting and he came over and hung out. It was good to catch up and hang for a bit. But then we went to a show that was in Aurora, and he did a spot there, and I hung out. And that was it was a fun show. It was a big brewery. It was a massive space. It's always funny because the people producing the show, all good people. It's like three people who produced the show. They were they gave off the vibe a little bit of like, oh, we're trying to grow the show. It's not, we're still trying to get more people in. I mean, it wasn't. There was people there for sure, but it's like a massive brewery. I mean, it's just huge. It's a huge space. Like if all of the tables were full, you're talking about like over 100 people, and it's just a huge cavernous space. There's maybe 20 people there, if I had to guess. But people were having fun. It's funny because I'll see people like that, and they'll be like in their head about the show, and I get it because I've been there. But also I've been there, and it's like, hey, you're doing your best. Like nobody's upset at you for doing a show where there's 20 people. Like all you can do is try your best to set up a show and get people out. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, like we're gonna do the show and try to have fun. That's one thing that, and I get it. Like I'm very in my head still about stuff like that if I'm running shows, but also over the years, you do start to understand like there's all I can do is try my best, and if that doesn't work, like don't beat yourself up. And most comics get that, so it's like don't worry about it. We're all out here trying to do the same thing, and a lot of times it's not a full crowd, and that's fine. That's fine. But hung out there during the show, and then I was kind of trying to pass the time because I had a late show on Thursday. A show at 9:30 p.m. It was a very late show, at Long Table Brewery. And boy, was that was an interesting one. It usually they have an open mic on Mondays, but once a month they'll have a show on Thursday. 9:30 p.m. start, pretty late, pretty late. But I got there. It was a fun hang. Had a couple buddies on the show. We were yucking it up. And I've heard mixed reviews. Some people have said like, "Hey, it's been very fun." Other people have said like, "Hey, it's, there wasn't really anybody there." But there were, if I had to guess, or let me count it out, there were probably like 8 people there plus comics. So like 8 people, and then some of the comics were there watching as well. But not a huge crowd. But honestly, 8 people is great. Like for a show, I went up second to last, so I went up, I don't know, like 10, 20. And to have 8 people, you're like, dude, there's 8 people looking at me. But before I went up, I mean, just the whole show, it was crickets. And so I had the man, I'm struggling with words. I had the understanding of what the crowd was by the time I went up. I got to just see every comic go up there and basically get almost nothing. So by the time I went up, I was able to like approach it from the perspective of like, oh, I know what's happening here. Let's just go have fun. They may not be into it, but like, it's okay. That's just what it is. So I go up there and I mean, just getting absolutely nothing. And so then I'm like, okay, in situations like that, if they're not laughing at the jokes, then it's like, well, let me just like connect with people. Because if they don't like the jokes, then maybe I can just talk to them and just be like a genuine human being and get a connection that way. And then if that works, you can kind of maybe dip into some jokes and get some laughs. And, that's kind of my approach when I find myself in situations like that. But the funny part is they did not want that either. I started asking, I mean, just some comics will approach it where they like ask an audience member a question in a way that they can tell, oh, I think the comic is trying to roast me. So they're like, hey, tell me something about this. And then they're like approaching it from kind of a mean-spirited place, maybe. Not all comics, but I think sometimes the audience members feel that and then clam up because they don't want to get roasted or be like the butt end of the joke. But I try not to do that at all. I try to just like approach talking to people in like a very genuine way. And I think I brought up, I have a bit about alcohol at a party, and I kind of started that joke, and then I was like, by the way, how's the beer here? Because it's a brewery. And there was like kind of no response, and I kind of tried again. I said, hey, what type of beer did you get? And the guy, I asked a couple of people questions like, what kind of beer did you get? What's your favorite type of beer? Just questions where I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to like be friendly. I'm not trying to make a joke about like, oh, you like that beer? You're dumb. I was just like trying to connect with the crowd a little bit, and they did not want that. Which is always funny because you go, okay, I did the jokes, you didn't like that. Now I'm trying to engage with you as just a human being. You don't want that. So then you just go, oh, okay, I guess I'll just go back to doing jokes to absolutely no reception, which is a very funny place to be in because you're just like, oh, you guys are here, but you guys don't want to be here. So I just did jokes, and I mean, I had fun with it, but it's funny in situations like that where you're like, oh, this is kind of so insane that you guys are even here, but don't want to have a good time and also aren't leaving. It's a free show. You didn't pay anything. Like you can go at any point. So it's very funny when you find yourself in that situation. So I was having fun, but I tried to play with the crowd multiple times. They did not want it to happen any of those times. And even funnier than that is after I got off stage, the next comic, a good buddy, was closing the show out. And he went up and he tried to address the fact that I tried to address the audience multiple times with absolutely no no luck at all. And it's one of those tension breakers. Like, hey, let me address this thing in the room and like make fun of it, and that will break the tension and hopefully get a laugh. And that just totally got nothing. And that made me laugh so hard because all of us as comics, we just, it's embedded in us. We see people go up. It could be the worst show ever. And all of our mindsets are like, I'll get them. Surely they'll like me. I'll get them. I've been doing comedy for 6 years. I'll smile at them and they'll love me. I'll do my opener. They're going to be on board. So it's always funny when, whether it's yourself or somebody else, like if you go up and you're like, I'm going to get them, and then you don't, and then just the feeling inside where you're like, oh, I was wrong. But when you also see somebody else try to do that, it's very funny. But this is how bad the show was as far as like people not laughing. The comic who closed the show out, he's a very funny comic, very good joke writer. Like he knows what he's doing, but just the whole show, nobody's getting laughs almost at all. I mean, maybe a little slight giggle here and there, but I mean, it's pretty much crickets. And he does his closer, and I don't think it really got anything. So he ended up closing on singing Silent Night in German. He just did a Christmas carol in German. Nobody laughed. I'm sure he knew nobody was going to laugh, but it was just one of those where you're like, why not? This has been a wacky show. Let me sing some in a foreign language, which was kind of funny. But yeah, so that was Thursday. Today is Saturday. I'm recording on Saturday. I have a corporate show that I'm doing here very soon. I'm going to be leaving in like an hour to go open up for good buddy Ed Bell. He's going to be headlining a corporate show. I'm going to open up for him. So that should be fun. But that'll be tonight. Last night, Friday night, got to headline a Don't Tell show, which was very fun. First time headlining a Don't Tell show. I was very excited for it. It's look, I'm sorry guys to just keep harping on the mental health and where my wacky brain is at every second of my life, but it's funny because I feel like whenever these big opportunities come for me, I always feel like, why am I in a bad place mentally every time there's like a good opportunity? Now, that's just part of it. We do comedy, myself, comics, like we do comedy all the time. You get used to, and you have to get used to doing comedy. Whether you feel good or bad, you're alert, you're tired, you're a little under the weather, you're feeling great, whatever the case. You got to learn how to turn it on when you get on that stage. So that's a part of it. So not making excuses, but just like behind the scenes, it is funny to be like, man, feels like most of these big opportunities that come along, I'm just like, ugh, could this be like next month? I'm like kind of going through it right now. Fortunately, and I feel like Thursday was a good dry run, even though that show wasn't great. Like just being comfortable in my own skin to an audience that was giving nothing, I think was just a good precursor. Is that the correct word? A good dry run before Friday. But also I can definitely tell, like with work being a little less stressful the last couple of days, like I was just in a high stress week this last week that was really taking its toll, and I'm starting to come out of that a little bit, which is good. I'm feeling a little bit better. But the show was in Loveland. It was at a brewery in Loveland, and so I work from 8 to 5, literally leave immediately, leave at 5, go through traffic for an hour and 45 minutes, get there, set up the show, and I'm usually hosting these shows. And part of my job with Don't Tell is I usually host, but I also bring the equipment there, set that up. I'll check people in, so people are coming through the door. I'm checking tickets, which is totally fine. But it is a different. It was kind of funny this time because I was headlining, but I was still checking people in. So it can be kind of weird to like check people in and then like do most of the time on the show later, it was totally fine. But if there's any sort of like altercation, which there's usually not, but sometimes it's not even an altercation, which that there could be an altercation. Like, sometimes people come in really drunk and just are upset for whatever reason. Maybe they had trouble finding the venue and then they're just like yelling at you or whatever. Sometimes people just come in drunk, and as the host or somebody on the show, uh, it's then like more in my head because it's like, oh, are they going to be a problem during the show? Am I going to have to do something to quiet them down, or am I going to have to deal with the situation during the show? So the more that you're doing that stuff before the show, just the more potential anxiety you have before going on stage. So I wondered if that was going to be something that I would carry on stage. Fortunately, I was feeling good, feeling okay. I wasn't feeling terrible. And the crowd was like super tight. It was probably like 40 people in the crowd, and they were really, really tight. So the host goes up, they're really tight. The first comic or the next comic goes up, who's a very good comic. I mean, all the comics on the show were very good, but the next comic after the host goes up, and he's very funny. He's genuinely like he's very funny, and they just like did not give him much at all. And then the next comic goes up, and she does okay. They start to kind of loosen up a little bit, but they're still pretty tight. So the host did 10 to 15. First next comic did 15. Next comic did 15. So I go up to do like 30 minutes, and so the show's like 40 to 45 minutes in, and I just felt at ease, which is nice. Which is when I'm feeling in the right mindset, where I should feel and what I usually do feel, which is like, hey, I've done this thousands of times. This is going to be fine. But when I get in these mental spirals and go through these periods where I'm just like, wackadoodle dandy, that's the name of the episode, Wackadoodle dandy, Wackadoodle Christmas. I just, all of that changes, and that comfort and that experience and all these things. It's like, it just goes out the door, and I'm like, oh, I'm in this weird space where I'm just like not able to handle stuff I should be able to handle. Now, that's not super, super often, but that's something I do feel like I deal with probably more. I don't want to say more than the average person or average comic, but I certainly talk about it more than the average comic. I'll tell you that much. You guys know that. If you listen to this podcast, you're like, please, anything but how you feel inside your head, Ben. For the love of all that is holy, stop talking about how you feel. I should just change the name of the podcast. It's not the weekly daily podcast. It's the weekly how I've been feeling daily podcast. How I feel every single day daily podcast. All right, those are bad names. Anyways, I go up. Crowd has not been very good, and I do 30 minutes, and I felt really good. I feel like I got them on board. I feel like they had a good time. I felt comfortable. I felt like I sold my jokes. I riffed a little bit and felt comfortable in the riffs. I threw a couple new jokes in there, and I got the light. And like, I had written my set list out, and it's always nice when like it's going well enough to where when you get the light, basically the host will light you to be like, hey, you've hit this certain amount of time. Get off stage here in the next couple minutes. When I got the light, I was like, oh, I haven't done a bunch of the jokes that I was going to do, which is great because that means you've filled the time. I filled the time with just some riffs and then some other things. So once I got the light, I was like, oh, I can skip a couple of these jokes later in my set that maybe aren't as strong. So I was able to kind of just pick out the better ones. And then I ended with a story about clogging a toilet, which is my closer, has been my closer for a while. I think it's a very funny joke. It was a very funny experience, very embarrassing experience. But I will say I have noticed that sorry, I lost my place here. Wow, we're at 40 minutes in. I haven't talked about Christmas yet. I'll finish the story and then we'll do a couple Christmas things. But The beginning of the story, I've noticed sometimes the crowd kind of tenses up a little bit and won't like the beginning portion. But the joke is like 4 minutes long, and so sometimes it'll go like a minute, and they're kind of like a little tight about it. And then I just fortunately have like enough punchlines in there that momentum continues to build and build and build and build. And then the final punchline is, it's why I use it for the closer, because it's just, it kind of is exactly how you want a joke to build momentum wise and then have like a good payoff at the end, which is what happened. And it felt good. Felt good to have a solid set, feel comfortable in my own skin. First time headlining a Don't Tell show. So I was super excited about that, especially being like, hey, you've been in your head, but also it's like, you got to flip the switch. You got to, one way or the other, this is a big opportunity. Figure it out. So that was cool to be able to have a good set and feel good about that. So yeah, excited that was able to go well. But anyways, let's get into a couple Christmas stories. I don't know that I have the best Christmas stories, but I'll ramble about it for a little bit before closing this thing off. But before I do that, if you guys have interesting Christmas stories or any funny experiences on Christmas with family or awkward thing, whatever, let me know. I'd love to hear your Christmas stuff. But I'm going home. It's different with Christmas now because it used to just be at my parents' house. But as my siblings have grown their families and obligations have changed where they have to go to, their spouses' families and vice versa, meeting places have been a little bit different. I think this year we're going to be at my oldest sister's place. But Christmas was always, I talked about it on a different podcast on Left Hand Right Brain, JD Lopez's podcast. Did like a Christmas episode with him and Ethan Everhart. But Christmas probably is my favorite holiday. Not like by a long shot. It's not like, yo, Christmas, and I won't even discuss others. But Thanksgiving is good, but usually Thanksgiving involves travel to somebody else's place, which, as I'm mentioning, or as I just mentioned Christmas, we're about to go to my oldest sister's, but historically, growing up, Christmas was, hey, I lived with my parents as a child, as most children do. And then you just wake up and you have Christmas there, at least Christmas Day. Some people travel on Christmas. I know it's different for everybody, but for me and my family, we had Christmas at my parents'. We would do the traveling other days, but it was always nice to get up. It was funny the way we did it. My parents would not allow us to run out until they like gave the thumbs up. So we would literally we would just stand at our doorway and wait for them. They're out there probably just putting presents around and doing whatever they're doing, probably getting some coffee before they're like, ugh, let's get our ducks in a row before these crazy kids come running out to the living room. But they would make us wait, and then they'd say like, okay, you can come out now. And then we'd all run out. And the way we do it is we would open presents one at a time. So it's me and 3 siblings, 4 kids total, and six people total, including my parents. And we would do one present at a time. I don't know how every family does it, but I feel like a lot of families is just like, hey, have at it. These are your presents. These are your presents, have at it. I kind of like the one at a time thing because it makes you have to be patient and kind of appreciate gifts a little bit more. And then you get to see what everybody else gets. And I don't know, it feels like more of a bonding thing than just everybody have at it. But we would do that. And then at the end, we'd do stockings. And that would be the last thing that we'd open. And then it'd be like 9:30, 10. My mom would make cinnamon buns. We'd have breakfast. And then it would just be like a free day, which not some of my favorite memories, but I guess some of my favorite Christmas memories, and I think probably most people's, actually, now that I say this, is when you'd be able to fill the rest of that day by playing with or using one of the presents that you got. And the couple presents that I remember being in that category would be video games. So that was a big deal for me. I didn't have video games super early in my childhood. It was like a later teenage years thing. So getting like a PlayStation console and then games from there on, being able to play those games for the rest of the day. Because me and my parents were pretty strict with like how long we could play video games. But Christmas was like an exception. It's like, hey, go all out. If you want to play for the rest of the day, go for it. But then, other days it's like, hey, chill, you can play for 30 minutes and then read a book. And I hated reading back then. So, my time was very limited on the video games. But also the other thing I remember getting a skateboard grinding rail from Scene 3. That was the name of the skate shop. It was like a foot high, and it was this big round. It was one of those things that was like welded together by the skate owner, I think. And it was kind of, it was like, oh man, this looks like something I'm going to get hurt on. Which fortunately I didn't. But it was one of those where you're like, oh, this is kind of higher than I want it to be. And it was a little scary. But I mean, I was able to do most of the grinds on it. The board slide 50-50. It was actually tough to do some of the grinds because being a foot up, my buddy had another rail that you could adjust, and it was like 4 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches. And so for like 4 inches, I mean, that's not very tall, but doing stuff like a crooked grind or I don't know, some of the stuff it's like I'm not ollieing that hard or high. But that was always fun. And I remember, and I probably mentioned this before, but I remember feeling so foolish in elementary school. One time we ran out for Christmas morning, and my dad, he made a big deal about it. He goes, I just saw Santa. He just went up the chimney. I saw Santa Claus. And I mean, I was like, my dad's the best. He saw Santa Claus. I mean, what other dads have seen Santa Claus, So I think I went to school and was kind of like flexing, I was like, my dad saw Santa. Yeah. Oh, Santa ate cookies at your house. My dad saw him. My dad, shook his hand. My dad said, what's up to Santa? He said, tell Mrs. Santa. I said, what's up too? And I told all the kids that. And then most of those kids at that point, they were probably like, Santa's not even real. Ben doesn't know. This is a sad, sad story. I don't remember when I found out. It feels like a traumatic thing to believe in Santa and then one day be like, I found out Santa wasn't real. It feels like something I should know. Like, when was the day that I realized Santa wasn't real? But I don't have that. It felt like a natural progression of like, Santa's cool. And then you're like, oh, Santa's not real, but that's fine. We still get presents. I don't know. Do you guys have memories of Santa Claus finding out that he wasn't real and being devastated? Let me know in the comments. Well, that wasn't that much Christmas stories. I'm sorry for rambling about the shows that I was on and how I'm sad sometimes. But thanks for tuning in. Merry Christmas. Hope you guys have a good holiday. And I'll see you guys again next week.